Hey everyone, I'd like to welcome everyone present to this fifth virtual meeting of the Joint Select Committee for Land and Physical Infrastructure. I'd like to advise that this meeting is being recorded for broadcast on Parliament's Channel 11 and Radio 105.5 FM and the Parliament's YouTube channel ParlView. I'd like to welcome our officials of the Water and Sewerage Authority to this first public hearing on this inquiry. I'd like to introduce myself and then allow other members of the committee to introduce themselves. I am Derup Timal, chairman of this particular committee, and I would like to ask committee members if they can please introduce yourselves. Just unmute and introduce yourself.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning to the WASA personnel. My name is Lisa Morris-Julian, member.
Good morning. My name is Saddam Hussein, MP for Baratory San Juan, member of the committee.
Member Roberts.
Good morning, Senator Anil Roberts, opposition senator and member of the committee. Thank you.
MP Richards.
Good morning, Kennedy Richards, member of Parliament for Point Fortin, member of the committee.
Thank you, members. The purpose of this particular meeting is to commence the first public hearing pursuant to the committee's inquiry into the management of WASA, Water and Sewerage Authority, and related recommendations with representatives of WASA. I'd just like to outline the objectives of the inquiry, and we have four major objectives. First, to examine the current state of WASA's administration and operations. Two, to identify the challenges facing the authority in fulfilling its statutory roles and functions. Three, to determine the measures required to improve the administration and operations of the authority. And four, to make recommendations to Parliament in relation to improving the administration and operations of the authority. At this point, I would like to ask the representatives of WASA for their introductions and also brief opening remarks. So maybe we can start with the acting CEO of WASA.
My name is Alan King, acting Chief Executive Officer.
Could the other members of WASA, the representatives, please can introduce yourselves?
Sulan Shepard, Director of Operations.
Thank you, Mr. Shepard.
Good morning, Mian Diaz, Director of HR.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Mian Diaz. I think we have one other representative with us. Is Ms. Dumas Harewood with us?
Good morning, Sherry Dumas Harewood, Director Customer Care.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Dumas Harewood. I'd like to remind both committee members and officials, if you could direct your questions and concerns through the chair. And just a bit of Zoom housekeeping is that at all times, once you are not speaking, that you can keep your microphones muted And there's a raise hand feature on the Zoom platform that for committee members and WASA officials to please utilize this feature accordingly so that we'll be able to recognize if you want to make a contribution, ask a question, or make a comment. I'd like to now open the floor to members of the committee to ask questions to the representatives of WASA. And probably we can start with, well, we have no fixed particular order for members to ask questions, but just to get the ball rolling, I could probably kindly request our member Morris Julian to lead off the questioning for the committee. Member Morris Julian.
Just 1 second, Chair. Just pulling up my chart, my documents. Good morning to the WASA top brass. And I'm trying not to bring anything personal into it, but I have an issue with WASA this morning, Chair, and I'm trying my best not to bring it up. But this morning, I know we would like to talk about the strategic plan, to the last strategic plan, Mr. Poonking. All right? Can you confirm if it's the last one submitted to the committee previously?
That is correct.
It is? So, Mr. Poonking, can you let us know if there have been any changes, any revisions at all, any updates? Because this is supposed to be something that's constantly evolving, right?
Okay, since the inception of the plan that was developed, it covered the period 2017-2022. Subsequent to that, there have been ongoing reviews on the approach, and we have an implementation plan that has been developed that we refer to as the transformation plan, and that is what we measure the issues that we look to implement. That more or less encapsulated the issues that were in the strategic plan and other issues that we put into WASA.
Sorry, apologies. Through you, Chairman, can you just confirm if this is the same implementation plan that, and I quote, 25% of the initiative were deferred to 2021?
Mr. Poonking, the member is referring to the response given by WASA to the
question 2, item 4, and the response to that would be yes. Yes, the reference to question 2, Roman 4, that is the plan that has been referenced.
Member Morris, you are muted.
I don't know why I'm only automatically muted, and then I have to keep remembering to unmute myself. Sorry, apologies, Chairman. All right, so is it possible to the acting CEO, the details and initiatives that were deferred to 2021, and I would like to know the main reasons for the deferrals. There are always reasons, and what are the reasons? Is it money? Is it personnel? I'm just like a little more info on that, if that's okay with you, Chairman.
Sure, Mr. Poonking.
Okay, so insofar as the details, that could be provided in writing, because it would be substantial in terms of the status of each of the areas. Insofar as deferral goes, the reasons or rationale for such deferrals would be based on availability of funding, capacity to implement, as being two main issues that would require deferral. As you would know, the WASA's implementation or capital program is funded based on subventions from the government under the public sector investment program. So depending on requests that are made and then subsequent releases, the program is amended to suit, and there would be deferrals that would occur based on such funding.
Through you, Chairman, right, we understand the funding, we will all understand funding is an issue, but I'm kind of interested when you spoke about capacity. Is this again referred to staff? What, could you just break it down for me as a layman?
Okay, when I reference capacity, the capacity to fully implement all the projects. To implement projects, we use in-house resources and contracted services. In terms of in-house resources, normally we would use such an approach, particularly for pipeline projects, pipeline installation projects, and for smaller other type of capital works, but on a smaller scale, we would also engage in-house. And beyond that, we go to contracted services. So the capacity to implement would be defined by our capacity to install pipelines and based on funding, issue contracts and manage those contracts.
Thank you, Mr. Punkin. And again, through you, Mr. Chairman, my ears perked up when I heard contracted services. Right, so I'm just asking on behalf of my colleagues, just give us one example. I'm not going to ask you to list all the contracted services, but just give me an example. In what scenario would that take place?
Okay, so for construction, for example, of booster stations, let's say for smaller projects, we would do in-house, and we've done a booster station on the Lady Young Road that was done in-house by WASA. Beyond that, we have larger booster stations that have been done and are being done. The largest one we've done is at Savanetta in central Trinidad, and that was contracted out. Currently, we have works ongoing at Tucker Valley in Chagaramas, and that is also contracted out. So those are examples. We have done water treatment plants. A plant was constructed at Charlottesville in Tobago that was contracted out as well. So it's a mix of approaches. In some cases, depending on the magnitude of the project, we would then also engage a supervising engineer who would undertake the project management portfolio with oversight by WASA.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Punking. Before we move to Member Roberts has his hands raised, and I know Member Saddam Hussein had expressed his wish to ask certain questions, but as Member Morris Julian raised the question of your strategic planning, what I noticed that the strategic plan you have for 2017 to 2022, but then in your response, you were, the Ministry of Public Utilities did request the authority to be guided by a 2-year transformation plan. And you came up with an implementation plan for 2018 to 2020 based on that request. I am just asking in terms of the consistency of this implementation plan, 2018-2020, with your strategic planning. Are they aligned, or did you have to veer away from your strategic planning that was outlined in your plan of 2017-2022, or is it in consonance with the strategic plan, this 2018 to 2020 implementation plan?
So it is consistent with the strategic plan. We do have a comparison of some of the initiatives, so that could be provided in writing, so that there could be clear comparison as to what was under the strategic plan or what is under the transformation plan, and the linkages.
All right, but why was there this specific need, this specific request to extract a transformation plan out of the strategic plan? Because the strategic plan itself is not that, it's just a 5-year plan. And what drove the need to extract a 2-year transformation plan out of that? Were there any specific criteria that needed to be addressed, any urgent matters that had to be looked at within the 2-year period as priority against the other factors that were involved in the 5-year strategic plan?
I think the transformation plan is an implementation plan. And as I indicated, it is consistent with the strategic plan. And it would have taken, the strategic plan would have been developed in 2016-17. And the transformation plan would have taken that as the base and looked at the situation at the point in time. And there would have been some small amendment and adjustment, but it looked at a 2-year window of issues that could have been implemented.
Okay, thank you. The committee welcomes your offer for the putting the response in writing to the questions asked by Member Morris Julian and what you just indicated to me. Would you want to propose a time frame for that for this submission?
That could be done within 2 weeks, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Poon-King. I'd just like to hand over now to Member Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Poon-King. Could you please let us know, between the strategic plan 2017 moving forward, the transformation plan, what has been your actual implementation rate of these plans in general?
So as we reported in terms of the transformation plan, the implementation up to December 2020 was 17%.
Okay, well, I don't need to say 17%.
That is correct, 17%.
What would be industry norms as you being a CEO? What would your target? I know you can't reach 100%, but where would you have liked to be at this? Certainly it can't be 17%.
Correct. Certainly the target would be of the order of 80% implementation.
So we are well behind. Okay, well, that leads me into Minister Lisa Morris. Julian was asking some questions. What has been the funding deficit that forced the deferrals and obviously the lack of implementation of these well-developed plans between 2017 and 2019? We won't worry with COVID. Let's pretend, leave COVID out, 2017 to 2019.
Those figures I could provide. The transformation plan, the budget would have been of the order of between $550 and $600 million. But I could provide that differential.
US or TT?
TT dollars.
And you think that what on average, I mean, we'll get the details after, but what percentage did you get or receive to implement? of that 500?
I don't have that figure offhand, so I wouldn't want a proper figure on that.
How much was allocated over this period for infrastructure, pipeline maintenance, and upgrade over that period, 2017, 2019?
Again, I don't have the figure at hand, and I wouldn't want to quote a figure that is inaccurate, so I could provide that in writing.
Through the chairman, we'll request some of those figures for the next time. Final question for this part. Last time we called you acting CEO. Today you are still acting CEO. How long have you been acting CEO, and what is the hold-up with you being appointed to the CEO position? As you know, in any army, you need a leader that will be entrenched. An acting CEO does not hold the same weight as CEO. Could you alert us to any of the problems that are existing now with that?
Well, I've been acting in the position since December 2018. In going forward, the organization as the authority will be directed by the Ministry of Public Utilities and the board insofar as transformation into the future, particularly in the soon to be future.
Thank you. Well, I would like to just on your behalf and the behalf of the people of Trinidad and Tobago hope that the acting is over, because we are not in Hollywood, we're in Trinidad and Tobago, and we need water. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Poonking. Actually, as Member Roberts raised that thing about your acting, you indicated since 2018, but in response to questions asked by the committee, which you responded to in writing, of the 8 top executive positions in WASA, we note that 7 of the positions are persons acting in 7 of the positions of 8. So I know Member Roberts was focused on our CEO, but actually Member Roberts extends to 7 out of the 8 positions, senior executive positions in the authority. Before we go to Member Hussain, Mr. Poonking, I know you said you will provide the information regarding the transformation plan and the reasons for not achieving the targets, but if you could briefly indicate to us, sure, funding is a major aspect of everything. We cannot deny that fact. But were there other issues, maybe broadly, you could indicate to us that that contributed to the inability to reach the levels within your transformation plan, other than funding?
Well, I think a large part of the transformation has to do with infrastructural works, which is capital intensive. So a lot of the underachievement in terms of implementation would be associated with that. Some of the other issues that would have contributed would have been that the softer side, so to speak, with respect to review of the way WASA operates and structure, staff structure, upper the executive, and so on. Those are also were not implemented and are currently being progressed by the board in collaboration with the ministry. So I think that I expect to have some movement on some of these things going forward. We will continue to be confined by funding, but we are focusing to try to get projects done to have as much an impact on customer delivery as possible, focusing on those areas in particular that get pipe-borne water supply less than 2 days per week. So that is our focus, to try to get, in the first instance, to stabilize the supply to those areas, and then thereafter to increase the regularity of supply, coupled with improved reliability of service.
Okay, thank you. Member Hussain?
Good morning. Thank you very much, Chairman. Now, I'm looking at the submission of the strategic plan that was submitted by WASA to this committee. And in it, I am seeing something termed Non-Revenue Water Program, NRWP. So just confirming this forms part of the strategic plan and also the transformation plan.
That is correct.
Right. And there are some of the projects that I'm seeing under this document that relates to metering. So I'm seeing the establishment of district metered areas throughout Trinidad and Tobago, install bulk meters, and SCADA to permit real-time management of production sources and transmission and distribution networks, the introduction of universal metering programs in the DMAs, which is the district metered areas, update customer cadastral, and update awareness program. Now, these seem as though, I know it was a very contentious issue in the past with respect to metering. Can you give us an idea whether or not this particular initiative, when it comes to metering persons, homes, customers, whether or not this was done, if any areas in Trinidad and Tobago has already been earmarked for the metering?
Okay, so in terms of an approach with respect to metering, the purpose of metering is to measure consumption at the customer, and also to provide WASA with data to inform our management decisions with respect to our transmission and distribution systems. So the issue of the statement bulk metering would be our the larger meters that would be installed to measure water production sources, as well as at key points on our transmission line. That would then give us an idea as to where the water is going, and in terms of the volumes and flows and pressures and so on. Beyond that, you then get into communities, and within the communities is where we get into the realm of district metered areas. So the district metered area would indicate within a community how much water is going. That would then give us an indication as to the consumption within that community. And within the community, we'll be able to estimate the population as well based on the number of households. That provides an indication as to whether you have high consumption or low consumption, and would then inform other initiatives with respect to control of flow, control of pressure, and conservation requirements. The last part of it would be the domestic metering. And domestic metering will then give us the capacity to measure at the point of delivery to the customer. Insofar as actual action we've done so far, we have started our bulk metering program, where we've installed 27 bulk meters. And that was just completed in December. And so we are now collecting data. And based on our data, the analysis that I referred to can then be done. With respect to the district metered areas, that will be the next step to get done. We do have some district metered areas already established and operational. We need to establish.
How many?
I think the total for Trinidad is around 160. And I believe it's around 40 that we have currently functional, but I'll get that figure and have it confirmed, and we provide that in writing. With respect to domestic metering, I say that will be the next facet of implementation, and such a program would be part of a larger program, so to speak, whereby we want to look at the rate structure and metering as the two go hand in hand. And in that regard, we'll be working with the Regulated Industries Commission to determine what would be appropriate for WASA.
Right. Now, Mr. Poonking, the implementation plan was a 2-year plan, right? So we started in 2018 and should have been completed in 2020. at December 2020, you were at 17% of initiatives that have been completed. Can you give us the projected date in which we may get at least, let's say, 90% implementation of this plan?
Well, as I indicated, it will be heavily based on allocation and costing. So we can do a projection based on the rate that we are going at present. Realistically, you're probably looking at a period of at least another 1 or 2 years towards achieving the 80% that I had referenced my response to member reports.
That's very conservative. We achieved 17% in 2 years, and then you're saying in 2 years we may get at least 90%. Well, I hope the authority does get the funding in order to complete their task. Now, there's one other issue I want to ask. The RIC made some submissions to this committee indicating that the rate review, I'm not going into the rate review as yet, Chair. It's just a question regarding the strategic plan. RIC gave a submission. They said that December 2020, the rate review started by them. And they are dependent on documents and data provided to them by WASA. And one of the documents that they have requested was the business plan for WASA. And WASA has indicated to the RIC that they will needed an extension till the 25th of February in order to present this plan to the RIC. Are you all on target to giving the RIC this plan? And what were some of the reasons for the non-submission when it was due?
Okay. No, we are not on target to meet that time frame, but as I indicated again, we will be communicating with the RIC towards completion of the exercise. WASA did undertake or had a business plan done in the period 2019 to 2024, and that was submitted. There was additional information that was requested initially, and then we were required to submit a plan for the period 2021 to 2026. So we do have some base data that would have been done for the initial plan, but given the passage of time, the base is now being reset. There is also the requirement where inputs into that plan, there's what we reference as the cost of service study, and that is an input to the business plan. And that was identified when we did the original plan in 2019 to 2024. We had indicated that we would want to do that towards fine-tuning and having an improved submission. So we are working towards having that completed and submitted to the RIC. We are very interested to have the deliberations held with respect to the rate review. So we'll be working as quickly as possible. We need to fine-tune the time frame and to communicate that with the RIC so that we jointly have a common time frame.
Can you also confirm whether or not the delay is attributed to the fact that before the cabinet, there's a restructuring proposal of the authority?
No, the business plan is a requirement of the RIC with respect to the review of the rates, and we are proceeding along those lines. So
independent of the restructuring plan that is before the cabinet.
Correct. It's something that we need to do regardless of the outcome of those deliberations.
Thank you.
Okay, we have two members with their hands raised. We'll go with Mr. Nigel G. Freitas first, and then afterwards we'll go to Member Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to everyone again. Sorry for being late. I just wanted to reconcile some of the statements that I've heard this morning so far. So I've sat on several committees where we've had inquiries into WASA, and I'm hearing the same things over and over again in relation to metering and the rollout of such. And I'm glad to hear this morning that, you're following the strategic plan and business plan and whatnot. But there was a disconnect even at that point in time when we did an inquiry that I'm still not hearing of, especially as it relates to metering. As it is right now, which is the reality on the ground, not everyone gets water in Trinidad and Tobago, but for some other reason, they still get charged, and therefore they're still paying WASA. So my question was, if it is that you're going ahead with the metering and you're metering households and whatnot, at that point in time when we did an inquiry, I did indicate that that is going to cause a dip in revenue to WASA because you can't charge people if they're not getting water, and the meter will show that. And if that is the case, and an expected dip is going to occur in WASA, on the other end, you need to sort of upgrade the pipe work in Trinidad and Tobago because that's the only delivery system that we have right now in terms of getting water to people. How do you intend to reconcile these two things, given that that upgrade and that restructuring of the pipe work needs to be done in tandem with metering so that everything lines up? WASA?
Okay, so the issue with the rating structure, our rates are not based on consumption. And your assertion that our revenue would drop is correct. And you had said for persons not getting water would not have to pay a rate. However, even for persons receiving a supply, their rate will also drop. If they consume the same volume of water, we collect less money. And this we've determined based on some pilot areas have been done with metering in Bacolet in Tobago, in Bonaire, and Palmis, and Balmain in Trinidad. And that is what was seen, where we've had a drop-off in revenue. So any approach with respect to metering would incorporate the whole issue of tariff, and to have the tariff set at such a rate that persons are encouraged to conserve. When metering, the literature indicates that when metering is done and consumption, when metering is done with an appropriate tariff, consumption goes down, the consumption rate. And with that consumption rate going down, you then have a situation that water that is saved, which is estimated to be in the vicinity of 15 to 20%, then becomes available for distribution to other customers. So as you roll out more and more of a metering program, you get benefits being realized in different communities.
Okay, so I understand what you're saying, but here's where the disconnect is. So non-revenue water, if I remember correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, was pretty high in terms of water that's not getting to the customer. And what I was trying to say is that there's a problem with the infrastructure and the ability to get the amount of water that we have available to the end user. So it doesn't matter if you meter people in a particular district and the consumption goes down and technically you have more water. If it is the reason that people aren't getting water in another area has to do with the infrastructure. So if it is that you're metering and based on consumption and based on the fact that people just not getting water and the meter says that they're not getting water, so they're not paying, you have a reduction in revenue. That very same revenue, which you would have taken to actually build out the new infrastructure or upgrade the pipe work so that people can get water more reliably. And that's where the disconnect is. People need to get water in order for you to meter them so that you can get revenue. And the problem is that the cost of doing all of these upgrades is so high now that there's a problem. How is WASA going to get this money to do the one thing that they need to do before they should start metering?
Okay, but you say before we start metering. There's no single solution to the problems that we face with respect to water supply. We do need in some cases to have improved volumes of water available for treatment. While globally, the figures that we produce would indicate we have enough water for the population, you will still have some communities that you need to have localized sources developed. And with the sources that we do have, we need to look at the variation that occurs between the wet and dry season. And in terms of, given that we have 60% of our water comes from surface water sources, and during the annual dry season, you get a drop-off in the runoff and it flows in the rivers. So in that case, you need impounded storage. So that will help with that type of fluctuation. Then in terms of the pipelines or the transmission and distribution systems to which you referred, given the fact that we schedule supplies to communities, in some cases, if I'm just calling a figure, let's say, and for easy mathematics, I'll say that you get water for 3.5 days per week. But you utilize water during that 3.5 days, you need to get enough water to last you for 7 days. So I am stressing my pipeline network and my booster stations to get water through to you at double the rate of if it was an efficient system that when you open your tap, you got water. So in some cases, we do have capacity to get to communities if we were operating normally and if we had a normal consumption rate. Given where we are, however, we know that we do need to have additional capacity. In some cases, we do, and in other cases, the capacity is not adequate even to provide the basic supply. So it's a combination of, yes, we need to do metering, but we need to do some of the other things in terms of pipeline replacement. There are also cases where we have unplanned development that has occurred, and we have what we in WASA reference as long service connections, where through uncontrolled development, let's say a side street, you may see 10 or 12 lines going into that street. And that also is inefficient and is high leakage. So those need to be changed as well. So it's a number of different things that will need to be done, and metering is just but one facet of it.
All right, I understand exactly what you're saying. I just happen to believe that, we can come up with solutions to solve some of these problems. I heard what you're saying in relation to consumption being one part of it, and just that example you gave where if for whatever reason there's scheduling taking place in a particular community and you're only allowed to have water 3 days out of 7 days, then a simple fix in my mind in a situation like that would be to educate the people of that community, saying, listen, you're only going to get 3 days supply of water, but if you manage your usage in a 1,000-gallon tank, then you will be able to have water for the 7 days. And from the standpoint of end user consumption, you can reduce consumption to allow the 3 days to suffice for the 7 days until the next week when you can, have the pipeline or the pipe-borne water turned on again for that particular community. It's things like that I'm trying to hear in terms of a program in WASA where, you have a tank program where in certain communities where water may not be readily or there for 7 days a week, 24/7, that you install tanks and somehow get the water to them from one area to the other. Because you just said it, it's not that we don't have enough water in Trinidad and Tobago, it's that distribution is a problem. And whilst we are trying our very best to upgrade the pipe-borne system to get it to every single household, there are other things that we could utilize to sort of alleviate the stress of not having water, because water is life. Is there any program like that in WASA to just alleviate that issue and make it just a little bit easier for citizens, especially the ones who may not have 24/7 water?
Right. I just want to perhaps I don't think it'll be the person who's getting the water 3 days per week They generally, when you go in such a community, I'm not saying that you wouldn't have wastage or high consumption, but it may not be as marked as in some of the areas that would get a more regular supply. So you're looking at people who get water 5, 6, and 7 days a week. I keep indicating that, so for example, watering of lawns, grass does not die. And the best example of that is the Queen's Park Savannah in Port of Spain, where every dry season gets brown. And then by the wet season, it's green again. You do, however, have to tend to your plants. And if you are doing that, use the water in a proper manner. So it's really the areas that get a more regular supply. They need to be more cognizant. And yes, the message, we do have a corporate communications plan that we are rolling out. It's generally, at this time of year, we will be looking at conservation. So you will be seeing us a little bit as we get into the dry season, a little bit more and more. Encouraging conservation. And we do have a program. We have a public education center located at our head office in St. Joseph, and we have one located at Hillsborough Reservoir in Tobago. And those two facilities in particular target the school children, the younger ones in particular, and we want to get it into their minds, the whole issue of conservation, for when they become adults and even when they go home immediately after, to get the message out. Given the constraints we have with the pandemic currently, we have started to do outreaches virtually to try to continue with that part of the program. But we are cognizant of getting the message out there that is a key part of what we need to do.
Okay, Member Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's not often that I agree with Senator De Freitas, but I must say, Mr. Poonking, that the Water and Sewerage Authorities, that of Trinidad and Tobago, not of those who can be metered. So I'll have to agree with my honorable colleague that metering, while a percentage or a high percentage of the population does not or cannot be metered, does not make sense. Furthermore, the irony does not escape me that WASA, who waste approximately 4.2 billion gallons of potable water per month, is discussing conservation at the consumer level. That's like a father who's always late telling his children to be punctual, or a father who, when he have a headache, he don't go to work, but telling the children he have a headache, go to school. I think that WASA needs to get itself in order first before for us to receive the message. We must not see the leaks everywhere we go. Right in front of my house, a leak. Okay. District metering. You told Senator MP Saddam Hussein that there are already district meters in place, and this will give WASA an idea of consumption. If you put a district meter in place by me in Diego Martin, it will give you no idea of consumption, because on my street alone, there are 6 leaks. So WASA will be getting the impression that me and my neighbors are utilizing water as if we have 50-meter swimming pools. But we are not. It is your infrastructure that is leaking. So how do you determine real consumption as opposed to consumption plus wastage?
Right. So the DMAs would give an idea of the flow coming into your street, as you indicated, and based on the trends, it would pick up. No, it wouldn't be a DMA doesn't constitute a street alone, but it'll be a larger area, and that would indicate that we have, is it a consumption issue, is it a leakage issue, and that would focus us to put additional resources that are required into that area. In terms of leak repair, yes, we have our responsibility, and we do have challenges towards getting our leaks repaired. The issue of leakage as well, is you need to do pressure management to manage that situation. If you look at Northwest Trinidad in particular, where we have elevated communities, the pressures that we have to achieve going up to those areas, we are required to put higher pressures on the lines, and so you do get increased leakage occurring. So leakage is something that WASA, yes, we need to do. That does not negate the need for the customer to try to utilize what he does receive, to use that wisely as well.
Well, I don't know if you have a GPS on my phone and you know that I am in an elevated area, but I am in one of those areas. So we don't get water very often, and leaks from the pressure is probably very worrying to you. The domestic meters, you're saying at point of consumption, where will these be connected to the house? Because you know, WASA, you will have your blue pipe, so to speak, that connects to an individual house. Where will the meter be placed? Close to the pump, to the where exactly to get knowledge of that specific household's consumption?
Normally, the meter will be installed ideally just inside the property, and then that we want to have the meter secured from vandalism or otherwise. And so that would be the norm. You'd always get odd cases that would arise, and we'd have to come up with solutions as those arise. But that would be the normal approach.
Okay, at the base of my driveway, there is a leak that has been there for a very long time. It's been reported about 7 times, but it's been there about 2 years. It's getting stronger. If that leak is there and the pressure coming up to me is diminished, will it give a red alert or a signal to WASA to know this is a leak? Also, what is WASA's current position in determining or getting notification of leaks? Is it only when customers or citizens call in, or do you have a grid and you have a big map of all the infrastructure, and when you see a drop in pressure, a red light and alarm goes off for technology? What is the technology to alert WASA to leaks?
Okay, so first, the leak that's on your driveway, if it's after the stopcock, normally
it's on the stopcock, like under the pavement there, just before. It's on public property, not on my property.
Okay, so if it's at the stopcock, it's something that WASA will have to come and look at. Anything beyond your the stopcock would normally be the responsibility of the customer or the resident. So if we let's say install a meter on your property, the meter will be beyond that, and the leak will still exist. The meters that we are looking to install would give us, it can give you multi data, so to speak, flows and also pressures. So if at your residence the typical pressure is 15 psi, and it's noted that it's been 12, that type of data, an alarm can be sent. If your consumption is typically 10 meter cube per month and it's gone up to 20 or 25, indicating a leak on your side, that could also be flagged, and we could say, resident, we suspect there's a problem here, please check your internals. So that can be done. With respect to notification,
Also, so what I'm saying is, so currently, with all the meters being in as many households or districts as possible, WASA depends on citizens calling in leaks, or if their staff drive along and see a bus pipe.
Correct. So we depend on information coming in manually, so to speak, via customers or employees picking up the leaks based on the activities they might be doing. And there may be leaks as well that would be not immediately visible. Again, Diego Martin is a community where we have a lot of gravels. So leaks can in fact occur, and the water doesn't come to the surface, and it flows and goes into a drain, and it's based on feedback from a customer or investigation that can be done. that we determine that there is a leak, and then we'd have to use specialist equipment to identify the leak and get it and repair it.
In 2021, what's the industry standard in developed countries, USA, Norway, Denmark, Australia, and so on? Do they utilize that same manual system of who see a leak, or are there systems or technology that we should upgrade to?
Well, as indicated previously, the first step is having the bulk meters installed, supplemented by the district metered areas. What would complement that would be the introduction of SCADA, which is supervisory control and data acquisition, which again gives us real-time data. The current system depends on persons calling in, so they will automatically be a time lag. Whereas if you have SCADA, you can get the data quickly, and if the repair cannot be done immediately, you can automatically or remotely adjust the system as required.
Well, in Trinidad, we need SCADA because what we have also is people who don't answer the phone, who take reports and reports made, and then you have to report to 10 different people. So we need that system in order to help you do your job properly. On last question, you said that at the ongoing rate of your strategic plan, which was 2017 to 2021, 22, and you reached 17%. You then said, well, a year or two to reach 80%. My calculation, and maths is not my strong point, is that 63% will take about 10 years for Vision 2030. How do you expect to accelerate the strategic implementation given the budgetary constraints before COVID in a post-COVID world?
The strategic plan, the implementation of activities within WASA, as indicated, a lot of what needs to be done is capital intensive, and part of the submission of the business plan will incorporate the need for capital works, because the RIC, while they are a regulator who would regulate the rates that WASA can charge for water and wastewater services, they have another role where they oversee WASA to ensure that given the plan that will be submitted, where WASA will indicate my intention is to do ABC towards improving service to customers, and it's going to cost so much money, and based on that I want a rate, they will also be monitoring to ensure that we do what is planned, and any future amendment of rate will certainly take into account our performance over the next 2 or 3 years.
Well, unfortunately, what I can see, if the trends continue and get worse as projected with capital investment and subvention from the government and the taxpayers, the citizens and customers could look forward to huge increases in order to try to implement the strategic plan, or else we are stuck as we are in the dark ages.
Well, I wouldn't want to preempt the analysis that the RIC will do. I think the objective is to bring the rates that are charged more in line with the efficient cost for delivery of the service, and reduce the subvention from government as time passes.
All right,
Member Roberts.
Shorter bars one time. Okay, Chairman, thank you. Sorry for taking so long.
Yeah, that's
very interesting.
So we take questions from Member Richards, and if you're after which Member Hussein, and then Member Morris Julian. So Member Richards.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I just have two questions, and the first one is based on the submission by the authority. It was stated that their staff complement was 4,950. On the same report, later it went to 4,803, and as of September 2020, it was 4,000 828. So I'd like that confirmation of the current staff complement at the authority, and what is the reason for the inconsistency in the numbers.
Right, for that response, I'll ask my Director of Human Resources, Mian Diaz, to respond.
Good morning again. The current complement of the Water and Sewerage Authority is 4,923. We have 4,803 ranges 8 to 68. We have 43 executives, and we have 77 other special arrangements, meaning those will engage for special purposes such as Adopt a River, the Customer Care Project, and the Tobago Wastewater Project. So that's how we came up with that 4,923. So the 4,803 was the baseline in terms of actual staff complement between ranges 8 to 68, which is general staff below the executive level, and minus the special engagements.
Member Richards, you okay with that?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Chairman. And the follow-up question is, based on the submission, was indicated that they require additional staff, which based on a mandate to adopt sent to wastewater treatment plans from the Housing Development Corporation and private developments. So currently, how many wastewater treatment plants have been adopted by the authority from HCC, and two, what preparations have been made to increase the staff complement at the HCC water treatment plant?
Okay, so far, going back in a bit in history, the first set of plans that WASA adopted would have been in 2004, where 35 plans were adopted from the then, I think it would have been NHA in those days. The latest mandate that we have is to take over a total of 72 facilities comprising wastewater treatment plants and lift stations. And to date, we've taken over 12 stations of that number. And we continue to work with the HDC with respect to taking over the balance. And going forward, the mandate as well is that as HDC does developments requiring wastewater treatment plants, that we will work with them so that they are transferred in quick enough time directly to WASA based on the directive of the government.
All right. Of those 12, the two that is in point 14, does that figure in the 12, and the 60 that are balancing? How long would that take to actually get that adopted by WASA?
Well, I don't have the information directly as to whether the two in point 14 are in the list. I know that we have a plant in Tichy, that's a WASA plant, but I can't say if the two, I think one would be on that Fortuny Reservoir, and I can't recall where the other one is. I'll have to get that and provide that in writing. With respect to the time frame for takeover, I say we are collaborating with the HDC because we want to ensure when we take over the facilities, it is a proper takeover in terms of legal transfer of facilities, in addition to which to have the plants in proper working condition, so that we don't have a situation that soon after we take over, we have issues arising where we have to then spend money to make good on a defect that was existing. So insofar as a time frame, I don't have one at this time, but we have started the exercise with HCC, and it's an ongoing one.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to the written submissions.
Okay, thank you, Member Hussain.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just want to follow up on Mr. Richard's question. Now, I looked at some of the submissions being made by WASA, and I just want to do some comparison with respect to the complement of staff and the salaries and wages that have been reflected in the submissions. So in the year 2016, the average staff complement was about 5,185. That is what we got as the average workforce. And then that was subsequently reduced to about 4,811, looking at the average workforce. So I would have expected that there would have been a decrease in salaries and wages because you have less people working now. However, from the period 2016 to 2020, there has been an increase of $37 million in salaries and wages, notwithstanding there has been a reduction in the work staff. Can the authority account for this inconsistent change?
Okay, I'll let the Director of Human Resources respond to that.
Ms. Diaz, you are muted.
Yes. So the increases in salary would have been on account of increments, because we do have yearly increments that are paid to staff, and for a while it would not have been paid, and we would have started back paying staff the increments that were due to them. Also, we have the issue where we were not recruiting persons from outside when persons proceed on leave. So we would have to pay acting allowances to persons to act in higher positions should persons proceed on leave. And we have a large number of persons who have vacation leave in excess of the statutory maximum.
Can you give us an idea of how many staff got paid their increments over that period?
I can provide that in writing for you at a later.
And since there's a large number of acting positions, can you also give us the number of acting positions throughout the authority?
Okay, will do.
Because that is something. If WASA right now has a decrease in revenue, but we're seeing an increase in salary and wages, and a decrease in terms of service to the customers through leaks and whatever. Now, I just want to go back, Chair, if you can permit me, to one issue with respect to the leaks. If you remember, in January 2019, former Minister Leigh Hunt made an announcement in the Senate that there was a company being engaged by the IDB called Utilis, which is an Israeli company that would have provided services to Trinidad and Tobago to detect surface leaks, meaning leaks under the surface. Mr. Punting, you referred to Diego Martin in terms of the gravel areas there. Can you tell us whether or not the Utilis is currently doing work in Trinidad and Tobago in an attempt to assist the authority with detections of leaks?
Right. So the Utilis intervention was at a point in time, and I in fact saw some of the work that it did, where we went, there was nothing visible, but they in fact detected a leak, a subsurface leak, and that was not where water was not coming to the up to ground level. So currently, to my knowledge, it's not doing anything at this point in time, and that technology would be applicable more so to deal with non-visible leaks, and we have a large number of visible leaks that we are dealing with at this point in time. So that approach is for when we get our visible leaks in hand, to use that type of approach. We do, within WASA, we do have technology to address what they do. What they do, or what they did for us and what they made available, was to use satellite imagery. Currently, when we have situations that arise, as in Diego Martin, we have devices that we could go in a focus area and do analysis within that area. Their own was a more widespread, where they will tell you, go into this area, although nothing is visible, something is going on. So I think that is something that we would want to get as perhaps a next step. But for now, our focus would be to address our visible leaks.
But taken from your point, I mean, nobody knows, or it's unaccounted for, what are the non-visible leaks. Has WASA, in an attempt, tried to do a full survey of the entire island, Trinidad and Tobago, to determine how many non-visible leaks there are, and try to go in and repair those leaks also? Because you earlier on said that you are dependent on manual reporting from members of the public and also your employees for the visible leaks. Now, you wouldn't know where the non-visible leaks are. Why wasn't that technology employed to do a complete survey of the entire country in order to detect those leaks and get in there and start plugging those leaks so that we can start conserving water?
Okay, the fact that a leak, if an invisible leak exists and the water is not coming to the surface, it could be one of two issues. It could be that the leak is relatively small, or the subsurface conditions are such that the water is percolating back into the ground. If you look at the Pareto rule, you call it, the visible leaks will probably account for 80% of the losses that we are having on our water system, and 20% non-visible leaks. Now, I'm just calling a figure. I'm not saying that's the exact figure. But certainly the visible leaks are what you need to get in hand. Insofar as doing a survey of your invisible leaks, we really need to address the visible leaks. What may happen as well when you do your visible leaks? The fact that it's visible, I mean, it's significant enough that a large volume of water is leaving your system. And when you address those in a particular area, particularly in the high pressure zones, then those invisible leaks may come up more and more. But as I say, we are at a stage where our initial focus is on the visible leaks. But we do have the capacity limited to look at the invisible leaks as well.
See, the reason why I asked the question is because I know that there have been several court matters that has been brought against the authority where subsurface leaks have been undermining various properties. And it was reported in the newspaper where some person was awarded a substantial sum of damages from the court because of these leaks. So that is one of the areas I was looking at in terms of these leaks can in fact affect person's property and the undermining of the structures of the properties. I think there are nine matters in that regard.
Right. Insofar as damage to property due to leakage, in some of the instances that would arise, you again have different conditions that may exist with respect to the topography, the soil, and the conditions. And in some cases, the damage that is apparent to the structure, to the household, to the building, may be a combination of things, a part of which may be the leak. One of the factors that would be seldom looked at is poor drainage. Generally permits water into a foundation, and then you could have issues arising with failure of the structure or movement of soil. When soil moves, then you could get a leak that would then further exacerbate the problem. So it's normally those situations will be a combination of factors impacting the damage to property. And when it's clear that we have some liability, we do fulfill our requirements. Sometimes it goes to court, sometimes it doesn't, but we do address the concerns.
Mr. Punke, just Member Hussain, I'm not stopping a line of questioning, but in terms of the line of questioning, in terms of the leakage, won't it come back to the whole issue of the utilization of bulk metering? as really the mechanism that the authority really has to develop in order to put that handle on a leakage. And I know you did indicate about 126 or somewhere there areas, district metered areas, which is your target, and that you have achieved about 26 of them, but it's particularly in the Northwest region from the response you have given to our questions. Now, the bulk metering, from what I understand, has the intention has been around for quite some time. And I mean, literally, it seems as though the authority is locked in between a rock and a hard place, because you are indicating that the bulk metering is the major mechanism by which you can look at demand satisfaction, and also as an indicator for leakage, both visible and not visible. But how long has this program been proposed? And in terms of your progress with the bulk metering, I know there are many factors you have to address at the same time, but what level of optimization is being given to the bulk metering in terms of your overall spending? What percentage is there? How much a priority is being given to it, seeing that it is such an important aspect of the whole management and the hydraulic modeling of your systems and all of those things?
Right. So the bulk metering has been on the cards for some time, as you indicated. We've just completed installation of 27 out of 28 bulk meters in Northwest Trinidad, and we have one more to be done. The delay with that is where we are constructing a station at Tucker Valley, and so that program has changed from only speaking of to actual implementation. So we've started. The overall cost for it will be around $15 million, and that would be across Trinidad and Tobago, and with having meters installed. So we have started the program with those 27 meters, and we will be implementing it in other areas as we go along.
Thank you. Member Hussain, you finished? Or?
No, please, Chair. Thank you. If I may. I want to look at another area regarding the management of WASA, and I'm looking at revenue.
All right, but Member Hussain, before I interrupt you, we'll be getting into a new area of the line of questioning. So if I could just invite Member Morris Julian to ask a question, and then we'll get into the area of revenue. I
oblige.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Chairman. Chairman, this is not directed to Mr. Punkin. I hope Mr. Punkin will appreciate a little break. It's actually an HR-related question, right? I know we discussed at some length with regards to the different salaries, etc., but I'm interested, Chairman, on the turnover rate for executives. Now, you can always tell what is wrong with an organization or what is right based on its turnover. So could I get a response to that, please? The staff turnover rate?
Ms. Diaz? Oh, sorry. Oh, Mr. Pilkey.
For executive, the rate is very low, if there's any at all, for executives.
Okay, so through you, Chairman, could that information be provided? Because if it's very low, well, because I'm interested in the factors that contributed to the staff turnover rate in the year 2016.
Okay. Ms. Diaz, would the authority be able to submit that information to the committee in writing?
Yes.
As requested by the member?
Yes, Chair, we would.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so then we'll move on to accountants. Through you, Chairman. Can you confirm what is the shortage? There's a shortage, correct? Yes? No?
Yeah, let me just make a correction. That should in fact have read no over the period 20. Should have been no. We did have a requirement, and at this point in time, our finance division, we are adequately staffed with respect to our accountants, and we are working on our external audits and the other requirements of the division with respect to having professional accountants on our staff.
Okay.
Through you, Chairman, is it that you have your staff now is saying this is an error, that you do have the required amount of accountants that you need, or are you outsourcing the accountants?
No, the accountants we have are to fulfill our internal requirements, both with respect to our day-to-day operations and also to prepare for our external audits. The external audits are done by an external entity, and there may be facets of the activity of the accounting that may be contracted out on occasion, but generally, at this point in time, we do have the staff complement of accountants that we are comfortable with. We have similar situations in other areas in engineering and so on, where again, when we have specialist assignments, those may be contracted out on occasion.
Mr. Punke? Yeah, sure. Please go ahead, Member.
No, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted a little more clarification, please, because I know the information that we got is directly contradicting what Mr. Punkin said. So it's an error on our part or error on WASA's part. And now I just want to make it clear, through you, Chairman, that there's no accountant shortage, right? Everything is fine with regards to that internally, correct?
Correct. At this point in time, we expect our accounting staff for the requirements that we have on our day-to-day operation and also our preparation for our external audits. We can say that our staffing is what we want it to be at this time.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman. All right, no problem. Yeah. Go ahead, Mr. Chairman. Sorry.
Thanks, Member, for those questions, because what I would ask Mr. Punking is that, seeing now that the complement of accounting staff has been fulfilled, in terms of your preparedness for the audits, is that well in hand? Because I think I'm not too sure, I stand to be corrected that the last audited statements were for the year 2015. Mr. Punke?
Right, so the last audited statements are in fact for 2016. And we do have our external auditors currently engaged, and they are working on the 2017 and 2018 simultaneously. And then thereafter, they'll be going to the 2019 and 2020. I think we have a completion date to be fully up to date with our audits by August 2022. August 2023, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Member Hussain, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Chair, I want to look at decrease in revenue. So from the documents, WASA has a decrease in revenue from 2016 to 2020 of approximately $110 million. When I looked at the number of customers, WASA has actually increased the number of water accounts by 14,000 for that period, and wastewater accounts by 3,000, and yet we have a decrease in revenue. Can you indicate what accounts for that decrease in revenue, although there has been an increase in the number of customers?
Okay, just before I respond or have a response to that, I just want to correct and to provide some information on the audits, the external audits. The schedule we have would be for 2017 and 2018. The schedule completion date is August 31st, 2021, 2019 and 2020, June 2022, and for 2021 for completion at the end of 2022 in December 2022. So that's just an update. And I'll let the Director Customer Care will respond to the question.
Good morning to Chair and panel. In terms of the revenue and the observation in revenue, the reference to the decrease in revenue, if we exclude the 1920 period, which the decrease in revenue basically was due to COVID, and we look at the other years, you'd see the average there, we were around 770. Now, the two major contributing factors to revenue is from our industrial customers and residential customers. So any decrease in the activity in the industrial sector will impact our revenue. And over those years, we had, in terms of plant closures and shutdown and idle plants, we lost approximately $20 million. And in terms of residential customers, you will also observe that the revenue from residential customers has continuously decreased in terms of persons not paying their WASA bills.
Right, and that leads to my second question. Now, I have seen also that the sum owing based on residential is in excess of $586 million, and the total sum owing to residential, industrial, agricultural all adds up to approximately in excess of 900 million. Let's just say close to $1 billion. What steps have WASA taken in order to properly clear or collect the revenue in order to satisfy this debt?
Director Customer Care will respond.
Actually, Member Hussain, based on the figures you called out there, I had actually calculated that the outstanding receivables from domestic is about 64% of the overall accounts receivable situation.
Okay.
Yes, Chair, the receivables from residential is around 64% of the total receivables. In terms of the action that WASA has been taken based on our debt recovery policy, we have two types of actions. One is what we refer to as encouragement, and the other is enforcement. Basically, encouragement means that the authority would send out SMS messages, make telephone calls, and issue demand letters in terms of reminding persons of their outstanding debt to the authority. And in terms of enforcement, which since last year, March, we would have the enforcement includes disconnecting customers. So we would have suspended that action last year, March, due to COVID, straight on to September. We still relaxed in terms of disconnection at this point in time. But in terms of the impact that the actions had, especially in the case of residential, the impact is greater for the business sector and commercial sector, and less impactful on the residential customers. For FY 2021, we have been able to recover approximately $17 million from those actions.
But clearly, what the authority is doing, and I'm sure that this debt didn't come up over 1 year. It would have been a prolonged period of money's receivables. It seems as though not enough is being done with respect to the other customers in terms of the business industrial estates. And probably more stricter action should be taken by the authority in order to collect the monies. Because if you're saying for one financial year, you only collected, $17 million in debt, and you have a total debt of $920 million in receivables. I am very happy that the authority took this decision to not disconnect the residential customers for the COVID period. And I agree that maybe an extended moratorium should be given because we are still in the pandemic. Persons are still out of jobs, whatever. But there are other customers that may have been owing for a prolonged period of time. For example, in the industrial estate, what steps can you say that will be taken to collect those revenues? Because it's in about $80 million in receivables from those two categories. We can't. I think it's muted.
Sorry. In terms of the industrial estates, that $41 million, only $29 million was due at the time of this report. So mostly in the industrial estate, the receivables, they average about, by the end of the month, will average to be about $12 million. And in one case, we have one company which we are in negotiations now that has $8.2 million for the authority, but we're negotiating that at this point in time. So the issue in terms of the industrial customers is under control. Industrial estate, sorry. The business and industrial, those are the ones that we have to continue to work on to get the reduction in receivables.
Can you give us some of the customers of the category water abstraction? I'm seeing $56 million.
Okay, in water abstraction, the major company there that's owing WASA is Petrotrin.
Petrotrin.
Okay. Member Roberts, the question that you have related to this aspect of revenue, or is it a different category that we're going in?
No, this category, Chairman.
All right. So because I had one or two things, but please, you can go ahead.
Mrs. Hayward just gave me a headache because if I did not realize that the shutdown of or the negotiation on a gas price that led to the shutdown of companies at Point Lisas also hit WASA in its revenue streams to the tune of $20 million annually. Mrs. Hayward, how much of this would we put across as bad debts, as many of these companies, 10 companies, have shut down at Point Lisas? Also, Petrotrin is your biggest, owes you a lot of money. So are you going after Heritage, Guaracara, or Paria to get that money owed?
First, I'll respond to the issue with the abstraction rates. That is a specific issue for abstraction from the Guaracara River to pump into the reservoirs associated with the Point-A-Pierre refinery. And that has been the subject of deliberation and negotiation between WASA and then Petrotrin for a number of years. So insofar as that debt, the matter is to be revived with the current Guaracara, insofar as having a negotiated position to recover the debt or to have it written off. But the debt is very old at this point in time and beyond 4 years. But we will be in discussion with Guaracara on it.
You said it's beyond 4 years. Who allowed it to reach beyond 4 years? Because MP Saddam Hussein will know better than me that WASA will be unable to utilize the civil proceedings to try and recoup. So you're in a very weak position, even though you're negotiating with your fellow state company.
Correct, but we have not held discussion with Guaracara, but we will discuss with them, and even if it's not recoverable at this time, determine the way forward if and when the refinery restarts as to what the mechanism will be going forward.
And now you see why it's very important, at least to the population, that the CEO of WASA not be acting since December 2018. Because if you are negotiating on behalf of WASA to provide the best service for your company and your customers, you would need to have some safety and job tenure. Because if you're negotiating with another state company, which all fall under the people who can make you permanent or not, it does not augur well for confidence in the population that you can truly negotiate strongly on behalf of your customers.
Mr. Pulke, I don't know if you're in a position to answer that. I could just note. But I remember for your support.
But it is clear that you need to be in a strong position to fight for your customers, Mr. Chairman. And it's really worrying. And you told me that there are 7 other executives who are acting. It's a very serious issue.
Yes, it is. In terms of the coming back to the question of the receivables from the domestic customers, I think now I can understand that water being an essential commodity for life and public health and all of those things. In terms of disconnection, there's an element of morality there in terms of disconnecting customers, and considerations have to be taken into account along those lines. But the authorities' approach seems to be centered around a soft approach rather than a hard approach. I'm just using those terms to sort of engage the public thinking. But how much of that $500 odd million in terms of age receivables? I mean, what sort of criteria that the authority uses in terms of time? Or is it based on time and quantum of money earned before we look at the hard collectible avenues such as disconnection?
Okay, based on the authority's debt recovery policy, customer owes the authority after 2 bill cycles had lapsed. So then we could implement any of the strategies starting from the encouragement. We must go through the encouragement phase first before we go to enforcement. So in other words, the customer must be reminded of the debt, right, given 7 days. Then after that, they would be sent a 48-hour notice. Now, since we would have suspended the disconnections per se, or even before that, we were softer on disconnection, both based on the issue of resources and the decisions taken at the level of the management of the authority. So the short answer is, after 2 bill cycles for residential customers has passed, that debt is owing to the authority, and we can start our debt recovery actions.
All right, but does the authority has any projections based on your debt recovery policy? Do you have any projections in terms of what sort of revenues you expect over the coming years to recover? Because I'm sure that has to be factored in your fiscal planning.
Yes, and for FY 2021, the original projection was $105 million. We have recently revised that figure based on the state of the economy and the fact that the debt is residential customers, and we have revised that figure to $80 million by now and the end of the fiscal year. In that regard, we will have to take some harsher measures to enforce those persons who have owed us for more than 2 years, because there are situations where persons have owed more than 5 bill cycles.
Okay, because the whole management of it, to me, it's vital for the authority, because I mean, you do have a proposal in front of the RIC for possible increases in tariff, and if we have such a large outstanding receivable from domestic customers, and then we are faced with a situation of increased tariffs, the projections of the authority for increased revenue through possible increased tariffs, it may not be fully realized because of this situation with your outstanding receivables. Mr. Poonking, specifically in terms of the deficit that the deficit funding that or subventions that are received from government, how it is that the authority manages then to meet its operating costs and its construction costs in terms of projects? Is the reduction in subsidy, do you give priority to operations and you just cut your projected projects? Is that the approach?
No, the subvention that we get, or the allocations, are specifically tied to projects or recurrent. And so in terms of the capital, for example, the projects would be amended in terms of the number. Currently, we're doing an exercise just to reprioritize our projects insofar as looking at the benefits against the cost that we will be incurring, so that if there is limited availability of funding, we could prioritize again to get the best benefit, to get those customers who receive water less than 2 days per week, to address the regularity of their supply. In terms of the recurrent, we have been taking measures to, as much as possible, reduce our cost, staff and services to meet the budget that we have. So we have been making adjustments to bring our costs down. It is challenging to continue to deliver full service, leak repair and so on, while simultaneously trying to reduce costs. But it is an exercise that we are on at this time.
Okay, thank you. See, we have some members with some more questions, but before we move off the question of revenue, in terms of your customer database, your response to our questions is that you stated that the authority's customer database does not capture the number of customers receiving water. And then in terms of customers currently being billed, you said that the database is up to date in terms of customers currently being billed. Is there a gap between customers receiving water and customers being billed? And if there is that gap, how significant a gap is it and the impact it has on revenue? In other words, how up to date your customer database is? Does it need a lot of work? Does it need a lot of tweaking in order to maximize your revenues?
I'll ask the Director of Customer Care to respond.
So I think that question, Chair, deserves a two-part answer. In terms of the current information on the customer database and our confidence level in that information, we could cap it about 80% in that we need to do a customer survey, which will involve confirming the customers, their addresses, contact information, and their connections. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it has to do with illegal connections. I think one of your questions asked us about illegal connections and how much we know about it. On average, we get about 300 reports on illegal connections. There may or may not be more of that outside, but to confirm it, we would need to do a survey. In terms of resources, this project was not funded in prior years. So in terms, the authority would now have to use internal resources and to do it on a case-by-case basis based on the information and feedback that we get from the districts.
But you want to hazard a sort of ballpark figure as potential revenue that could be derived from this exercise?
If we were to utilize even the small average of 300 customers, 300 illegal connections per year, that will be an additional $600,000.
Okay, thank you. And then one final question on the revenue aspect is the bulk of revenue is based on your annual rateable value for properties. That forms the basis for your establishing your charges. But what the committee notes is that since I think it's 2009. We haven't reviewed the annual rateable value for properties. It's quite a significant period of time has elapsed, and thus the potential for the authority to increase its revenue is severely affected by this lack of update of annual rateable values. What are the reasons really that has contributed to this delay in the update of the annual rateable values on which the authority bases its billing?
Well, the update in terms of the annual the ATVs is not on WASA's side. It would be on the Ministry of Finance side because we depend on them in terms of getting those updated information to charge our customers. Right now, with the gap, there is a mechanism for us to estimate it, but we can't. So for a new customer, we can't estimate. However, for the existing customers, we have to wait on the revision.
Okay, but any indications from the Ministry of Finance regarding that, regarding the exercise?
We have no information at this time.
Okay, thank you. Member Hussein, and then we'll go to Member Roberts.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chairman, there's a very essential issue I want to address, which is the debt incurred by WASA. And I just want confirmation because I saw it on the document. Is it that WASA, the total debt is $10 billion?
Correct. That's the figure.
Right. Now, what I am seeing that you all have a policy with respect to dealing with this debt, a debt recovery policy, which looks at billing, collecting outstanding wages, which would not be enough, fulfilling statutory requirements, notifying customers to avoid accrual of rates, debt recovery procedures. Do you believe that these initiatives or measures outlined here will be able to properly address that $10 billion debt realistically?
Well, just for correction, the policy, the debt recovery policy that we have deals with us recovering debt owed to us. The $10 billion is debt owed on behalf of WASA. And in that regard, we don't have a policy per se with respect to that.
Well, now that makes it worse because you now have a $10 billion debt, and the authority has not have a policy in terms of how you're going to deal with this debt in terms of restructuring. Has it been deliberated upon by the authority? How are you all going to address this? Or is it that we're going to see something very similar to what happened to Petrotrin?
Well, the deliberation on the outstanding debt, we do collaborate on an ongoing basis with our line ministry, Ministry of Public Utilities, and Ministry of Finance with respect to managing debt and the expenditure that is being incurred towards either increasing or reducing the debt. So it is a dynamic situation, and we do communicate regularly with respect to this. The issue, given the sums of money, some of this debt is for activities that were done a number of years ago by WASA, insofar as whether it needs to be restructured or otherwise. Again, that would be guided by the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Public Utilities based on deliberation with WASA.
Has WASA made any recommendation to its line ministry for the restructuring of this debt?
Not within recent times, to my recollection. No, we haven't made a recommendation for the overall review of the $10 billion portfolio.
Okay.
Member Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bear with me if I have to go very slowly because I nearly fell off this chair. So WASA currently has a $10 billion debt. WASA has a strategic plan that is 2017 to 2022 that has only reached 17%. They would like to go up to 80% in the next year and a half. Yet government subventions based on the statements by the Minister of Finance seem to be not apparently available. We passed in the Senate more legislation for WASA to borrow. Please explain to me, with the prevailing atmosphere and climate of lack of government support or inability after COVID, pre-COVID, post-COVID, of the government subvention, the prospects for it being great, being very limited. How is WASA going to fulfill its strategic plan? How is it going to get investment to improve infrastructure, to create metering district and domestic and so on, and actually run and sustain its 4,900 employees? This equation, I don't know, my ball head might explode soon to understand. Please explain to me, with this debt, a national debt approaching debt to GDP ratio of 91% right now. Are we just talking dreams or pie in the sky? How is this going to happen?
So from WASA's perspective, we get funding from two avenues: government subvention, rates and charges for water and wastewater services. The RIC determines the level at which we could charge rates and charges, and that is our focus at this time, to have that review done so that we could generate our own revenue and reduce the requirements for subvention from the government. And that such revenue would be required to fund WASA, including recurrent capital and debt. So I don't think the government subvention will stop. The intent is to have it reduced as we go forward. So while the debt is substantial, it will have to be included in the equation with respect to rates and charges.
So, Mr. Poonking, as you can see, my hair is growing based on my concern for the population. We are in a high debt profile. Debt servicing is very high on the agenda of WASA. WASA's revenues are down, both industrial and domestic. Bad debts are huge. The subvention from the government for the foreseeable future is going to be diminished. And the way that WASA intends to do all of this is through increased rates paid by citizens. My afro is going to be, I need an afro comb. Citizens now have to be very worried, Mr. Poonking, by what you're saying. This burden is going to fall on us through RIC and increase in rates. This is very scary for people of Trinidad and Tobago.
I don't think it needs to be scary. I think what we are working towards is to have a realistic charge for water and wastewater services. I give the example of a bottle of water from any of the bottled water providers.
Not Blue Waters.
Well, I would say any of the bottled water providers. Okay. I'm not getting into any names. But persons would pay $3 for a bottle of water, and they would think they're getting value for money. The maximum rate you can pay for water rates in Trinidad and Tobago is $3 per day. So to say that is reasonable or realistic from our perspective, I don't think it is. So something more needs to be paid. What level that needs to be will be the outcome of the deliberations by the RIC based on the submission of the business plan.
You would agree with me that if you go to your barber and you realistically for the last 20 years paid $40 for a haircut, and then it increases because the barber's electricity bill and his equipment and his nice stinging chemicals after, you have to pay $100, that whether it's realistic or not from the point of WASA will be very painful to the citizen and the customer, because realistic to us is what we have been paying.
So we need to make an adjustment. I don't think it is. We need to make an adjustment going forward. That's how I
Chairman, I bow, but I am scared for the people.
Right, and also Member Roberts will have the RIC before us at our next meeting. So I think the angle of questioning there, because a lot of that tariff increase is within the purview of WASA, falls back on the RIC. But yes, working in tandem, I think that concern is a valid concern. The impact on the population, I'm sure the RIC would be taking that into consideration as well. The intention was to end this session at 12:30. We still have a bit of time. I see Member Hossain has his hand up, but before we go there, Member Hossain, if you would allow me, in terms of the human resource aspect of WASA, manpower, staffing, In response to the questions posed by the committee for a response in writing from WASA, I see that WASA, the approach being taken is that to rationalize manpower, level of manpower staffing is number of employees per connections. So that I think the regional standard for utilities regionally, it's 8 employees per 1,000 connections. But in response to our questions, that if we are to go with 8 employees per 1,000 connections, it would mean a reduction in staff of approximately about 1,400 persons, if I read the response correctly. And then WASA's proposing that if we look at 10 employees per 1,000 connections, well then we'll be more or less okay, because by attrition, your staffing level would be in keeping with 10 persons per connection, 10 employees per connection. Now I'm just wondering this approach of employees per 1,000 connections and going by regional standards versus detailed manpower needs analysis based on the operations and processes and administration needs of the authority. Could you advise the committee as to which is preferable to WASA, or is it the going by that criteria of number of employees per 1,000 connections, or giving priority or more importance to an actual manpower needs analysis?
Okay, I think that the manpower needs analysis is needed, but even such an analysis would have to take into account the approach of the organization. So while the regional benchmark is around 8, Trinidad and Tobago is peculiar to some extent when compared with our sister islands or territories. So Guyana, Barbados, St. Lucia, and so on, in terms of wastewater, they are all underdeveloped compared to Trinidad and Tobago. We currently have coverage of around 30 to 35% based on the recent works that we are doing or have done, and the works that we continue to do in the wastewater sector. So we have a significant proportion of our population served for having centralized collection systems. After Trinidad and Tobago, the next highest is Jamaica with 15%. So to compare us to the other utilities, we need to take into account that wastewater component. In addition to that, the extent to which works are contracted out. So we have taken a deliberate approach where we have, for example, in the past, pipeline repair has been done using contracted services. We've done ground maintenance using contracted services, and we've stopped those activities. Those 2 activities are labor intensive, and while yes, there are some efficiencies to be gained, we still those are things that we are doing internally. So I think we need to look at that the overall basket of activities and determine whether WASA's interest and the interest of the customer would be best served by having it done internally within WASA or externally. Having done that, we could then look to have the manpower analysis done.
Thanks, Mr. Punking. Based on what you outlined there, how much of that is within your strategic plan, that 2017 to 2022? How much of what you outlined there, those those studies and research and coming up with the optimal sizing for the authority and the optimal balance between contracted services versus in-house services. Is that within the strategic plan?
No, I think that what I just described there, insofar as where WASA is at this point in time, is something that we'll be looking at, I would say, in the foreseeable future, insofar as the direction we go with respect to carrying the organization forward and the appropriate staff complement.
Okay, thank you. Member Hussain?
Thank you very much, Chairman. Chair, I just want to follow up on a question that you would have asked earlier. And just 4 short questions I have, and I'll be completed. Can you tell us, will a customer survey, as mentioned, be conducted? And if so, when will it be completed?
Oh, I thought you were going with the 4 questions. Sorry. Right. So the customer survey, as Mr. Duban said, would have indicated, it will cost money. So we haven't got the funding for it yet. I think my hope and my intent would be, as we go along, if we get the funding for the metering program that we want to have considered as a universal metering, that in itself would require identifying connections and properties and so on. So that would give us the vehicle to get it done. There are 1 or 2 other initiatives we are looking at in the shorter term to use in-house staff to do as they conduct their day-to-day investigations, to use devices which we have to procure to pin the geographic location of a connection to our system, and then that will then be linked to our customer billing system. So we'll have that linkage. That will also give us the wherewithal to one of the questions I think that that we received, the linkage between billing and service. So that is something that we will be doing independent of the other activities. But I think the best vehicle towards getting that survey done outside of the actual customer cadastral survey would be through metering.
Second question. In your submission, there was an average of 342 illegal connections reported per year over a 5-year period. What steps will the authority take in order to stop these illegal connection of water?
I think the issue of illegal connections, first of all, persons don't see water as being dangerous. It can be, certainly not in the same category as electricity, but tampering with water infrastructure, in the first instance, it's illegal, and the second, it can be dangerous. The same instance I alluded to with Member Roberts, where in some cases our pipelines are at high pressure. Go and tamper with any such line to try to put any device onto it. If it's not being properly done, you are exposing yourself to danger. Insofar as having the detection done, when we do receive reports, we do act on it. Again, even the district metered, the meters that go in district metered areas and the bulk metering and so on, that would help as time goes on and we collect data. You would see trends that if things are going up and your leakage is in hand, that would point towards illegal connections. It takes a lot of outside of universal metering coupled with your district metered areas and bulk metering. If you just have bulk meters and DMA meters, it'll take a little more investigation. But we want to, on an ongoing basis, discourage persons from doing such things and encourage them to have a legal connection, and that can be provided to them to have access to water.
Well, I know persons may, and this is not telling persons to go and take an illegal connection, but something that hampers legal connection is the length of time it takes to process an application and for someone to be hooked up. So I think WASA can also look at that. The third question is, I see that there are 26 facilities that are non-functional. Can you state whether or not the authority has any interest in terms of addressing these non-functional facilities?
If a facility is non-functional, it could be that based on the needs of the system, it's no longer required. We do have, for example, sites where we would have had service tanks in the past, storage tanks. We do have booster stations that are no longer required. By constructing larger, more efficient, up-to-date facilities, it does make some of these facilities no longer necessary. So some may be reactivated, some not so. We do have instances where we reconstructed tanks on sites that we previously had tanks. So it's an ongoing. Some will be reactivated and some not.
And the last question deals with, again, salaries and wages. Is it possible that you can provide the committee with the salaries, benefits, and remunerations of the senior executive of WASA?
That could be provided in writing.
Thank you. That is all for me, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. We have about 9 minutes again. But before I invite closing comments from the CEO of WASA, Member Roberts, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. CEO, how much does it cost per unit, whatever your choice of unit, to convert reservoir water to potable water?
I'll defer that question to the Director of Operations.
Mr. Shepherd.
Good morning. Hi, good morning. Our last calculation on the current water treatment plant, it takes about 23 cents per gallon to produce potable water from our reservoirs.
Has this cost globally, which is steel?
I'm not hearing.
Sorry. You hearing me? Has this price, is it that it will increase or?
You're still muted.
No, I'm not muted. I on.
No, we are hearing Member Roberts quite well. You are not hearing him, Mr. Shepherd? It seems that Mr. Shepherd is not hearing us. Is not hearing us. Yeah.
So could you just repeat the question, Member?
Do we expect, due to the COVID-19, we're seeing different increases in steel prices, in materials and so on. Do we envisage that this 23 cents per gallon will increase or decrease going forward, let's say for the next 2 years?
Well, first I want to say 23 cents, I'll have to have that figure verified. But insofar as costs going up or down, as the case may be, we depend inputs into water production, and we have the infrastructural cost, which in many cases is already established. So the currently plant to which Mr. Shepherd referred to, that exists. Inputs to the actual production would be power, chemicals, staffing, and so on. So as those fluctuate, our inputs would fluctuate. Because while we've referenced the RIC several times this morning, we also know that the RIC is considering power within their remit as well. That will have a significant impact on WASA in that our monthly bill for TNTech is around $12 million, $10 to $12 million. So if there are any fluctuations there, you could directly see we would be impacted.
Mr. Poonking, thank you. I know your position is difficult, but you have to understand what I'm saying. I'm just seeing pain for for consumers, and I'm trying to ease their pain. Yes, you made recommendations to the RIC. The RIC, it is clear, has to have a rate increase in order for WASA to even remain viable. If it is 23 cents or 40 cents, depending on different costs, not really important. But if we are wasting 4 billion gallons of water per month at a cost of 23 cents, roughly that may be $800 million per month wasted. So if we can fix the leaks, we can therefore ease the pain of the rate increase that is definitely coming to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Can you see that? And how can we factor that in to ease the burden on the pocket of the people?
Mr. Punking, if in your response to Mr. Roberts, you could also, at the end of your response, you could give us your closing comments, because we'll be wrapping up after that.
Okay, thanks, Chairman. So I need to collect my rates in order to fix the leaks that Member Roberts referenced. So I say it's a situation that we need on an ongoing basis that our persons pay their rates. So we can't do what we need to do. That being said, I want to thank the committee for the opportunity to present on WASA's situation. Some time ago, WASA had a tagline that said, "Water is life and infrastructure makes it happen." And then I think that needed to be amended a bit to reflect water is life and infrastructure and people make it happen. And the infrastructure part demands funds, but certainly the people part, we do have a committed staff at WASA towards making good on delivery of water and wastewater services to the population. It is a challenging job, and I think the WASA team is committed to support the initiatives of government, Parliament through this committee towards us delivering on our mandate to the population of Trinidad and Tobago. And we thank the committee for their support and look forward to working again with coming up with solutions towards achieving what we need to do. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Punking. On behalf of the committee, I would like to extend our appreciation, our thanks to you and to your team, Mr. Shepherd, Director of Operations, Ms. Diaz, your Director of Human Resources, Ms. Dumas Harewood, your Director of Customer Care. The community really appreciates your response to our written questions and the manner in which you all dealt with the questions from the committee today. I'd just like to put you on notice that we will be meeting on March 3rd. We have invited the RIC and the Ministry of Public Utilities, and we would be re-inviting WASA to also be part of that meeting on March 3rd. Because I'm sure members would have some supplemental questions that they would like to ask. And because of the interaction with particularly the Ministry of Public Utilities and the RIC, we think that it would be good to have you all present as well at that meeting. So thank you all once again. I'd like to thank our viewing and listening audience for tuning in. And of course, my committee members, sincere thanks for your participation and your attendance. And I would also like to express our thanks to the Secretary of this committee, Mr. Gordon Greenwich, our Assistant Secretary, Ms. Renee Batson, and also our Research our graduate research person, Ms. Katrina Gokul. Thanks, everyone. This meeting is now adjourned.